passage we're reading today in Matthew 8, 5 through 13, we're talking about the centurion. And this is a very significant piece because it's really talking about a man that Jesus was marveled at his faith. And Jesus talked about his faith and how there was no one in Israel that had this. And Jesus is known as the founder and the perfecter of our faith. And we see that in Hebrews 12:2, but he marveled at the faith of this man. And it's only in this instant that the Gospels record such a response what Jesus does. It happens in Matthew 8, 5 through 13, and it also corresponds in Luke 7, 1 through 10. And, we sit here and we think, who was this man that marveled Jesus, that made Jesus talk about his faith and how great it was? Was it a rabbi? Was it a disciple? No, it was a Roman soldier. Jesus had just walked down from a mountainside outside of Capernaum, and he had just delivered what would become one of the most famous sermons in history. And when he entered the town, he was met by like a small delegation of Jewish leaders. They really wanted something from him. They had an urgent request. There was a Roman centurion whose servant was so sick, who was so about to die soon. He wanted to seek Jesus out. And so he sought out these Jewish leaders to see if they would speak on his behalf. The centurion had asked these leaders to go to Jesus and see if he might be willing to heal his servant. Now, this was kind of very unusual at the time because these Jewish leaders were not in the habit of being very fond of Roman soldiers. And Jesus felt this obvious oddness in this situation. But I think he discerned the Father's hand in this, and he set off with them to the centurion's home. And he had just preached hours earlier on the importance of loving one's enemies. So this was something that would kind of encourage everyone to see that at work, of loving your enemy. And then as they got near the house, another group of friends intercepted them, and they talked and they were quiet and they were hushed. And some of the people around thought maybe the servant had already died. And then a representative of this group came over, and they talked to Jesus, and they talked to him in a very respectful manner, and they were like, "Teacher, I have a message for you from my friend who is the Roman." And this is what he said, and this is very profound, and I think this is where it gets lost in translation, even by the elders, what this centurion says in his message to Jesus. He says, "Lord, do not trouble yourself, for I am not worthy to have you come under my roof. I'm not worthy for you to even come under my roof. Therefore, I do not presume to come to you. I'm not just going to come to you, Lord, but say the word and let my servant be healed. For I am too a man set under authority. And when a soldier is under me, I say to one, go, and he does. And I say to another, come, and he does. And to my servant, do this, and he does it." And so Jesus kind of thought about this, and he pondered on it, and he was very thoughtful about what this soldier was saying to him. I mean, think about the words that the soldier said to him: "I am not worthy to have you under my roof." And he says, "I am too a man under authority with soldiers under me." And so Jesus, nods his head. We see in the scripture, he nods his head slightly, and there was a hint of a laugh almost. And you got to understand, this man was a Roman soldier. that he was a representative of the enemy of Israel. And he just preached on this. And yet he understood that even these Jewish elders didn't even grasp what it was. It was a marvel. And he looked back at the friend and then to the elders, and then he turned and he scanned his eyes over and all the disciples and the small crowd that had followed him down from the mountain. And he said loud enough for everybody to hear this. Now, this is in Luke. This isn't in Matthew. He says, I tell you, not even in Israel have I found such a faith. And both Luke and both Matthew in Luke 7:9 and Matthew 8:10 use the Greek word thaumazo, in which we translate it into marveled or amazed, to describe Jesus' response to this centurion's faith. The only time this word is used to describe Jesus' response to others' faith is in Mark 6:6, when we marvels at the lack of faith in the people of Nazareth. And this is where he grew up. And the centurion was one of the most unlikely people to amaze Jesus. He was a Gentile. He was a pagan in his upbringing. He was a Roman, and he was stationed in Palestine to subject these Jews to the emperor's rule. He was a man of war. He achieved the rank of centurion by distinguishing himself above others in brutality. Not exactly the resume you'd expect of someone becoming one of the Bible's great heroes of faith. So what happened to this man? We don't know. But he was there in Capernaum, and he was a miracle of God's marvelous grace. He was a living illustration to many that would come from the east and the west and recline at the table with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. This centurion is also a reminder to us that this man who looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on your heart. And we see that in 1 Samuel 16:7. I think we'll be surprised someday when Jesus doles out the rewards to us. I think, when most of the greatest ones among us will probably have lived in the most obscure ways that we would ever even think of. Jesus, he isn't impressed with titles. He isn't impressed with degrees. He isn't impressed with achievements. Not like we are. He is impressed with those who are really humble and really do believe in him. And I think that's where he looks at this centurion's faith, and just like he said, he is marveled, he is amazed. John Piper once quoted Billy Graham in saying, God will not reward fruitfulness. He will reward faithfulness. The centurion was a picture of faith, a picture of faithful. And I don't know about you all, but after reading this passage, that's somebody that I want